Okay, so let's preview the front end in our browser. You can see it looks exactly like the example I showed you earlier. So we've got settings, name, and then our save button. So now that we have the initial form created, or the front end created, we can go ahead and start to handle the events when the save button is clicked. So the jQuery here is pretty simple. The first thing that we want to do is check for an event handler. So we're going to use a selector to select this button here, this save button. So it'll be hash save button. Now when that's clicked, we need to run a function. And let's just pull that down. Inside here we need to do three things. The first thing we need to do is grab the name or the value of the elements on our page. So grab values. Now the first one is going to be name, and obviously you can add subsequent values depending on how many fields exist in your form. So for now we just have var name, and then we're going to use a selector name.val, and that's going to return the value of this field here, this name field, into this variable name. What we then want to do is show loading text, and essentially all we're doing here is we are changing the, let's say, save status span to the text loading. So save status dot text loading. Now you might wonder why we create the loading text into here and then we continue. Now this is all really this is all we need really for a loading text to be displayed. We essentially just pop the text save status into here. So for example, now if I was to press this button, you have this loading text here. Now when the AJAX request or the HTTP request is complete, we can then change the text of this and update that to that we've successfully saved or that there's been an error. And therefore in the meantime, while the AJAX request is loading and the data is being sent, this will always be displayed. So that's an easy way to create our loading symbol, or this could even be .html, and you could go ahead and place some kind of image in there that would show the loading status of it. Some websites use images. And now we want to send or perform HTTP requests, and this is the post request, so we're sending post data to settings.php. Okay, so before we do anything else and before we start to send this data from here into our settings.php file, let's go ahead and set up init.php, which stands for initialization or initiation. And the first thing we want to do is start a session. This is so we can make use of sessions. Like I said previously, you may already have some kind of system to do this. Well, this may be implemented already. My session name is going to be user ID, and this is going to be equal to 1. Now this would vary depending on which user is logged in. However, I only want to update where one exists as a user in the database, and that is just for the simple reason that we're not going to be creating a whole registration system just in this tutorial. The next thing we want to do is connect to the MySQL server, and we are connecting to localhost. The username is root, and the password in this case is nothing. I'm then going to select a specific database, and that is jQuery. As we've already seen in phpMyAdmin, the database name is jQuery. Okay, so now that we've done that, we don't need that file anymore to be open. We don't need to, well, we'll leave it open, but we don't need to type anything else in there. Settings.php is going to include this init file, so init.php, because inside settings we're passing the values using post. So we're passing this value inside of here to settings.php. So we need to include our database and session data in order to update our database correctly. Okay, so inside ajax.js we need to send some data to a file which is our first parameter. and that is php/settings.php. That's this file here. The next thing we need to do is specify which data we are actually sending and the variable name. So I'm going to call the variable name, remember this is the name we pick up in PHP, and then I'm going to send the data as this, which is the name we picked up from here. So this is the variable name that we pick up in settings.php, and this here is the actual value, which is the name retrieved from the name field in our page. I'm then going to create a callback function and give this a value of data, and remember data is the value that has been returned from settings.php. So this will data will now either be something like successfully updated your settings or could not update your settings. So with data we want to go ahead and put that into an area on our page. So we use a selector, we select save status, and then we say .text data. So whatever is returned from settings.php will now be put into save status, which remember is where this loading text is now. So that will override this loading text here, and then the loading will only be shown while the request is in place. After the request has finished here, the save status here will be changed to the data returned from settings.php. So an easy way to create a loading message while we're loading this page.